Well, here we are once again, and I would like to say I'm here to give Olly Mack a break from all the interviews he's been doing for International Game Book Day, but he's now the subject of the interview. So this man has worked really hard ever since we started this venture 3 years ago. You wouldn't have had all the amazing interviews and videos without his hard work. And also he's got the most fantastic backdrop for any interviewee or interviewer. So I thought it was only fair that Olly should step into the limelight and actually get to talk about his own game book related role-playing game projects. So Olly, hello.
Hello, hello, John. In fact, we
fancy meeting
first time
you
I met
here.
you. Yeah, first time I met you was Fighting Fantasy Fest 1, the first one you organised. I can't remember how good it. I think I just
yes, it was.
I just saw it pop up, and I remember going along, and I was just doing photographs at that time. I wasn't even thinking about writing any books, and I was dressed as an orc, which I have the mask here, or goblin guard, and I went around and pushed everyone in the queue. So
yeah, and people love that.
It was good fun. It gets a bit sweaty now. I'm less likely to wear that nowadays, especially when it's so old and horrible and stinky. But yeah, no, I've
because you got in touch.
I've been
I got in
contact with you
to offer the photograph people dressed up. Yeah,
that's right, and met so many fantastic people there that I've been friends with ever since. It's been a joy. So I appreciate you for organising that in the first place.
Well, we did that back in 2014, wasn't it? I think the first one.
Good Lord.
But I think the Storymaster's tales, were they already a thing or a nascent thing? Because I know you've done wedding photography, but then you also think online or Twitter, you had the fairy studio. So people would come along and dress up in slightly mystical, magical costumes, and you'd use all these amazing effects and backdrops to give them wonderful settings. I remember at the first fest, actually, you took a brilliant photo of my children, who are now, my son's now an adult, but he was a warrior, my daughter was a wizard, and it's one of my favourite photos I have of them, because from just being in a hotel, in a room, in a venue at a hotel, then now I think it's in Bogium Castle with fairies flying past and crystal balls, and it's absolutely incredible.
That's right, and it was great fun doing that. But basically what my background is, and it honestly does all stem, I blame Ian and Steve for this, from the Fighting Fantasy books. It honestly does. I picked those up, Warlock of Firetop Mountain, got obsessed with Death Trap Dungeon, Forest of Doom, and when I was about, I think I was 13 at the time, I was ill over the summer. And I was always very artistic, and I started to draw and paint those illustrations on the walls, the Ian McCaig illustrations. I sort of started working out how to do it and then painting them up, and that got me into theatre college as learning scenic art and prop making. So the fantasy line has gone through, and I used to make trolls, full-size sort of trolls costumes, and witch kings and all those kind of. And I was a very avid live role player, so all these elements have kind of gone into my career ever since. And when I was doing the photography, it was fantasy. It had to be wizards, had to be knights, had to be props, scenery, and just making the whole experience as fun and as vivid as I could for families coming in. And then it was always my ambition to turn it into a live family experience. So from the photographic studio, it very quickly evolved into a theatre show. And I use the principles of Fighting Fantasy, I suppose, which is very simple rules and lots of action, lots of story, and lots of interactions. Although we made it even more interactive, because you could talk to the creatures and the monsters and things. And it's great, and it worked, and that's something I've tried to put into my games. That all the games you play are very easy to play, but they're also very interactive. So they'll have the theatrical elements that we use in the show, such as the soundscapes and the narrations, but they're in at home, you know. So the theatre has gone out and around the world now, and it's been pretty successful.
Yeah.
Pleased to say.
Yeah, because I was going to say when
So,
I first saw what you were doing, I think it was just the books to begin with, and then, or it might have been the soundscapes at the same time. So you were, I think, on Kickstarter, you had soundscapes for people to play whilst they were either playing your adventures or just general role play sessions. But then obviously you
yeah,
always had that theatrical element, and it became more and more theatrical. In that, I remember in lockdown, you did these wonderful sessions, several times a week,
which we still do.
weren't you?
Yeah, we still do the live action Zoom role playing games, and we've got people from all around the world who play them, and we're actually playing characters from the books.
Yeah,
and now the characters,
I know they came
players,
more and more impressive with like the video. To begin with, it was kind of the backdrops a bit like you've got now, and you video record little pieces which you could then play over in the background, and you cut between them, and they just became more and more impressive. It's kind of like an updated Nightmare, I think, for those of us who remember the 80s TV show.
There have been comparisons. Yes, people who played it said it was like, yeah, they certainly evolved from that. But actually, going back to the books, yeah, sorry, the very, very first book that I did was actually a home version of the plays and the interactive shows that we're doing. And I gave people the script. We had the acts and the music and all those kind of things. Instead of masks, obviously we've got very complicated masks here, silicone masks. We had paper masks, which you crimp, and then you could basically crimp them up and play goblin or troll or whatever, you know, and just put a sheet over you. So it's all, but that was a little bit too complicated, a little bit too involved. So I had to kind of pare it back to what people would be happy to do. And then actually on my honeymoon I was doing this. I was kind of started doing some illustrations. I used to illustrate one at art college. I was drawing these card size pad, and I thought, actually, I'm still all right at this. I had, you know, not amazing, but all right enough to do a demo. So I thought, okay, what can I do with these cards? How can we make this into a game, which incorporates all the theatrical elements? So it originally was just going to be cards, which you'd lay out, and then they'd have the options upon them, and it'd just be that kind of game. And then I thought, well, why not? There's more. I can put more from that card into a book. So instead of having the information on the card, it's now in a book, and then it's just sort of evolving from that. And I wanted it to be totally accessible for the whole family, and that was my other kind of important point, that you could play it with not first, they're a little bit too young, although we have had that age. You could play it with a 7-year-old, and you could play it with granny, and you could play it with auntie, you could play it with your wife who doesn't know role play. So everyone can have fun with it, everyone can be the GM. And it was about finding all those things that stop people from role playing normally, like time, not knowing the world, not knowing the rules. If you break all those down, what you end up with is a story adventure which everyone can get involved with, and that's where,
because you create, or certainly with those original, with the original ones like that, with the cards, you have different quests, don't you, which characters can complete with the adventure, but using obviously the same set of cards. But then I think a sign of the success of that is when other people start writing their own adventures for your game. And I did see somebody published one, which I think was The Hunt for the Unicorn, but using exactly your rules, your card, your setting. So it inspired them to create their own adventure.
It is great. And I've been sent quite a few teachers' testimonies who are using them in the classroom or using the library, and they're finding that their students are starting to write their own Storymaster tales and doing the illustrations and doing, because it's essentially a small bit of flavor, flavor text, describe the scene, give you 4 options, and then what can happen from those options. So it's, and for those 4 options you can really go in many different directions, and then from the options even more sort of details can come out of it. So replayability is huge on these games, because if you know you can never shuffle a pack of cards the same way twice.
Yeah.
And you've got a pack of cards, you shuffle it, it's not going to happen, and then you're going to get different options, and you're going to choose different rewards, different treasures you might find that might suddenly spin the adventure on its head. And then you're encouraging the people to play it to don't read it. You don't have to read it verbatim. If you're reading it solo, then you do. But if you're playing other people, expand upon it. It's a story master. You are the story master. I'm not the story master. The player is the story master. It's for you to kind of take hold of it and take it in any direction. If the rule doesn't work, don't worry about it too much. It's about the experience at the end of it. So yeah, that's
and they're all compatible with each other, aren't they? Yeah, so,
yeah,
they're all compatible. So you can. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, they are. We have the world, which was the stage show. So we have the Weeding Wood, which is the woodland area. It's all set in a familiar world, so 1750 sort of folklore, fantasy. Underneath there, you have Draco Deep Dungeon, which lies underneath the land. And then to the south, you have Threatlore Town. And these are the three areas I always wanted to create when I first the first one. So that was always in my head. So when I was writing Weeding Wood, I kind of knew that there'd be characters appearing, there'd be little situations. You start seeding them in the first book, and they'd start paying off in the other books, and vice versa. When I got to the last book, I'll start throwing little seeds back from the first book, so it wouldn't matter which order you played them in.
And you've published Towers, which is the most obvious, I suppose, expansion for the games, isn't it? I think you can play them as their own game, but the idea is to incorporate them into the world.
Yeah, it's an odd one. I kind of did it for a bit of fun. So I said, how can we just change it a little bit, have an expansion, but it can be played solo as well. So I said, okay, well, imagine if 4 mythical towers just spring out of nowhere, and you're just going to raid them for the gold and the treasure. But you can have them appearing in the woodlands, you can have them appearing in their dungeon, you can have them appearing in the Threatlore Town. And this is, this is the nice thing about it. You can really kind of play around with the worlds as well. There's characters. Once it's yours, you can create it as you like. But there are certain characters that reappear, and there's little, like I said, little seeds that will appear, will help you a bit as a story master. Kind of link things together, and you want the player to make those links as well.
Because also one of the things that helps give the feeling that it is an entire world is your artist, isn't it? And the art that's in the, well, yes. I'd say it starts off on the cards, but now they've evolved back into books. But how did you come to meet with Nick? Or
Nick, I basically did a search for someone who could do that kind of folk arty style, that kind of woodcut style. Because for me, when I'm writing something, it's got to, the artwork has got to be as important as the writing, and they've got to play off to each other. So what I do when I do something with Nick, I'd write what I wanted in that world. So with a pack of cards, I was limited to 50, and then we had a certain amount that we had as reward cards. I always had 50 in each one, and it seemed to be about enough. So 50 areas. So I think, what else? That'd be good. Put that in there. Put that in there, and then I'll send that to Nick, and then he'd send me back the artwork, and I'd go, "That's great. Now I'm going to write the description based around that artwork." So I'd flesh it out there. Yeah. So you might put like a fish in there. So okay, I'll put a fish as an option, and then then they just kind of bounce around that way. And his artwork has changed considerably from when he first started to what we do now. He does slightly more complicated pieces. Sometimes I'm a little bit more descriptive of what I want. But it works beautifully, and it works nicely, and also because it's black and white, it's easier to print as well. It was another consideration when you're doing book printing. You want it to look as good as you can.
But I think there's nothing else quite like it that I've seen. It really sets your games apart, and I think it's so hard. It was so important with games like that, where the quality of the art is actually the first thing that most people will see. So it gives you an idea of the quality of the writing as well. They go hand in hand. And I think the covers you've done for the new, is it print on demand editions, look amazing.
Yes, yeah, the colour ones.
So
Well, again, the cover has got to grab you. You know, if you're shopping anywhere and you're going through, you know, it's got to go. Oh, hang on, whoop, go back. What's this? You know, if it doesn't stand out that big on a screen, you're missing out. So I've always made sure that whatever artwork I'm doing, it's going to be bold with colours and the typeface. It's really important for me. It's very different to your covers in a book stand, you know, because half the time you're looking at a spine or you're seeing a little book amongst all the other books. There you're looking for something a little bit different. On a screen, it's entirely different for those. So that's obviously been important for me. Also, the way we've changed the game itself from a card game. Now it's not a card game. We actually use maps instead.
right.
So again, that's a different way of playing, which hasn't changed the gameplay at all. It's exactly the same way. You know, people thought, "Oh, I like the cards," and you can still get the cards, but it hasn't made the game suffer. In fact, it's made it easy to transport because you can take a map, print it off. That's all it is. You're not going to lose the cards. It just, and even the pages have dice in them as well, something which obviously Fighting Fantasy did, and I've kind of expanded it from there. So now they have dice all down the side. So wherever you flick, wherever your thumb is going to be, it's going to be above there. You've got those options. You've got the D4 and the D6.
That's a great idea.
And it's like the artwork has got to be big and bold on those.
Yeah,
you're right. We do have a color edition now, which is only going to be on Amazon, because, you know, for me, Amazon's been great because you can send it out all around the world immediately. You know, so for me, that's been the consideration, because Kickstarters, although fantastic, shipping prices are very expensive nowadays. It gets much harder to send it out to people at the end of it.
Yeah.
So I always want to encourage that.
Yes, obviously we both use that as a route to get our games and books out there. But I know, as you said already, obviously with the Storymaster's Tales core games and world, that's very much a family game. But you've also now started to branch out in other directions, haven't you, for a slightly darker tone, shall we say?
Yeah, I've always loved Cthulhu. That was my probably favourite role-playing game growing up. I remember Green and Pleasant Lands, which was on the English Cthulhu supplement, and just poring over it and just loving the adventures in there, and wanting to play a butler and being obsessed by sort of Agatha Christie as a young man. I think, this would be great to kind of take into a game book format. So when I started doing a Cthulhu one, I thought, how can we do this differently to other authors before? How can it feel differently, and how can it be true to what I do? I'll bring the candle in there for dramatic effect.
The mood.
So, you know, I wanted it to be like a testimonial and like a homage to Lovecraft's writing. So he obviously got a certain amount of books, so we had a certain amount of rooms in a hotel. So I wanted each room to be one of his stories, and then we had all these kind of Cthulhu soundscapes that I produced, which go along with it. And then I got my voiceover chat Mel to do like a Vincent Price voice, and it just worked brilliantly. And the whole experience again went to be quite theatrical, which is another thing that ticked it off. So that was great fun. And then we did a family version, which was the Tome of Terror, which is a little bit more Hammer horror, or probably Carry On Hammer horror, Carry On Screaming, also. And then we got the Gothic horror, and that you've got 4 Adventures, and then it's just, you know, it's fun, but it's silly and it's gross, and, you know, something that's going to appeal to maybe a slightly older, but I'm still talking tweens to teenagers to adults playing it,
Right.
and they'll all have a blast. And some things will go over the kids' heads, some they'll kind of shock horror.
Yeah.
But there's nothing horribly
So
graphic
what's
in it.
so what is
Yes,
what's the latest one that you're working on now, or that
the very
you're
latest, and we've
promoting?
just launched a Kickstarter on it. One of my other loves is magic. I'm a member of the Magic Circle. I'm not a practicing magician, a practicing wizard, but not magician. And it's something I've always loved, that kind of parlor experience that we don't really do any longer. It's something that's very popular in the Victorian and Edwardian period, when people were doing seances and dowsing and playing sort of weird parlor games. And we don't get that. The closest you get that now is VR, and we've all got the facilities to have a very exciting, scary, and weird experience in our own homes, if you set it up right. And you just need darkness, silence, dramatic music, and the right kind of impetus. And that's something I've been doing. So all the things that made me kind of creep and wonder what was out there when I was growing up, and then since I've worked out how it works, and the scientific reasonings and the magical reasonings, the psychological reasonings, how these games work, and then I've repackaged them so that people can do it at home. It's not a magic book. I'm not going to be revealing secrets. I'm going to be putting people into a situation where strange things will sometimes happen. I can't guarantee they'll always happen, but I know there's a lot of people who will find strange things will definitely happen.
Wow.
And that's something which I might take for granted. I might think, oh, actually, or I probably have been taking for granted that everyone knows this stuff, but they probably don't, because then they haven't been brought up on it.
Yeah.
So
that sounds amazing. You say you're not a practicing. Yeah, you say you're not a practicing magician, but people are going to be reading these books. You won't even be in the room, and you'll still be working your magic on them.
Yeah. Oh, the great thing is most people are doing it to themselves, but they don't realise it. I don't want to say too much. I want to give away secrets and things. But half of it is the paranormal experiments, but the other half is parlor games, Victorian, but they've all been completely rewritten, represented. Very, very simple to play, but I promise you, playing them, you'll have a lot of fun. You'll have a heck of a lot of fun with them, especially using the soundscapes with them and the rules. So
sounds really clever.
For instance, so I've got one, for instance, which is called Minutes to Midnight, and the premise is the devil comes along and possesses one of the players, one of the people in the room, and then they have to get the rest participants to find some items within the room by giving them clues, and they could be simple clues, they could be very complicated. That's up to the person who's saying it. They have to invent them, and meanwhile you've got a clock ticking and the devil's voice over the top, and then the people frantically trying to find these items that this devilish manifestation is going to be asking for, and then you start getting the chimes of the of the clock going to midnight. So you'll kind of get a little bit of that going if it's right and it's in the dark. But there are people don't do these games. I think the closest thing that people have obviously been playing is Werewolf, which has been popular, but it's far simpler than that. But people don't do it. They used to do it, parlor games in the 70s and before that, before we got a little bit obsessed with looking at our phones all the time. Put the phone down, light a candle, turn the lights off, play some music. Strange things will happen.
It sounds amazing.
That's Kickstarter at the moment.
So people need to go onto Kickstarter. They need to look for Oliver McNeil. It's the new one called the Horror Masters, Scary Games and Paranormal Experiments. Is that right?
That's the one. Yes, yes, yes. It's just
So
taken.
and
We
pledge their
launched it
support.
yesterday, and it's gone up the chart. It's just overtaken Darren Brown, which is kind of nice.
Oh wow,
So, but
fantastic.
you know, different type of. But I to quickly tell you about the other ones that we got. Obviously, Weirding Wood. We've got Draconic Dungeon, Tome of Terror. Coming up over the next couple of years, we've got a pirate one, which is going to be our
Yeah.
biggest one. So we've got quite a few sections on that. You've got voyage areas. Nick's actually we're adding another 10 areas just for the port itself. So it's going to be massive. And we're hopefully doing a Kickstarter for that around Christmas time, maybe just after. That's Mysterious Islands. And then we've got Tome of Terror London. But we're also producing deluxe versions of all our games for colour.
Wow.
So this is going to be, they are being done now. And one more, Hotel Lovecraft as well. We've done a new version, so it's entirely cardless. Beforehand, we had cards. This, you have the QR codes in there as well, and you've got these fantastic maps, cross sections of the hotel itself as you descend down. And again, that's a very theatrical experience, solo and group play. So lots going on. And then hopefully I'm going to be sort of next year doing live stuff again.
Busy for a few years, absolutely amazing. And I can definitely recommend them to anybody who wants to try them out. I was just thinking, in case people are wondering, because I haven't made it clear, it's International Game Book Day. I mean, these were true games. As you said, there's theatre as well, role play. I mean, they are their own thing that's really special. So people should definitely check them out.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you.
And on that note, it just remains me to say thank you very much to Olly Mack for all his hard work for International Game Book Day. And it's been a pleasure talking to you as always.
Pleasure. Thank you, John.